welcome back. Jiu-Jitsu 2000 here today. I'm coming at you with another reloading video. Now this video that I'm shooting today, it's unfortunate because I haven't been able to get to this, but I've had a ton of requests to do this round. 7.62 by 39 Russian. Oh man, I have mixed feelings when it comes to this round. And I think a lot of fellow service members share that feeling with me. Excuse me, the reason that I say that is because this round, even though it's very, very popular worldwide, this round was on the other side of the field, you know, against us. And so I'll tell you one thing, it hurts like hell when it hits you if it don't kill you. So that would make a lot of us, you know, veterans, it would make us kind of biased against it. But what's real important here is let's take these blinders off and let's open our mind. Let's open our hearts. Let's open our eyes. And let's look at this round for what it really, truly is. It's a magnificent round. If I can look at it with a non-biased view, the 7.62 by 39 is a beautiful round. Now, again, it was developed for fighting, for war, for conflict, and things like that. And it's proven time after time that it's been successful at that. One thing that I've personally noticed about this round that just really turns me up, you know, in a good way, is the fact that this round, it doesn't care if it's sub-zero temperatures, it doesn't care if you're at the hottest point in the world, this round will fire and it will function without any kind of problems. You know, it's very popular because it was built for the AK-47 platform. It was also used for the SKS platforms. There's several other platforms that it runs on, but those are the most popular, AK-47. It's a beautiful round. Doesn't care where you're at in the world. Cold, hot, night, day, it doesn't matter. It will function. Back when the military, you know, we used to take some of those AK-47s that we'd use and we'd beat the hell out of them in the field. We'd bring them back and we'd pressure wash them. You know, that's how durable these guns are. You drop them in the mud, you shake them off, and they'll still function. There was times where our M16s would get kind of finicky. We had to step up to M14s, you know, M14A1 308. That's a great caliber, great gun. But anyway, I'm kind of getting off topic here. One thing that I want to think about. Now, I'm not a prepper, I'm not a doomsday guy, but I do think about what kind of guns I want to own. And when I think about that, I think about a survival situation. I think about, you know, if all shit hit the fan tomorrow, what kind of gun am I going to reach for? What's going to be my top couple of guns that I'm going to carry? Well, 7.62 by 39 I would say would be in the top couple of guns that I'm going to grab. And the reason I say that, and in this comparison, I'm kind of comparing it a little bit against the 5.56, the AR-15 platform. I have one of those as well, and they're both great guns, no doubt about it. But the reason I would kind of reach for that 7.62 is very simple. Both guns are capable of killing people, no doubt about that. In the event that I ever had to, God bless, I hope I never have to, but if I ever had to, you know, both of them are going to win at that one. So it's a mix there. Let's move forward. Let's say we want to shoot small game. Okay, they're both equally successful at that. Rabbits, you know, coyotes, whatever we got to shoot, badgers, we need to get some food, meat. Okay, they're both fine. Let's move up another notch. Okay, let's say we need to get some deer meat, right? A little bit larger game now. We're not talking about varmints anymore. We're not talking about small game. We're talking about mid-size, you know, game here. 2.23 or the 5.56, that's, you know, a well-placed shot. You could knock a deer down. The 7.62 by 39, not so well. And what I mean not so well is, I mean, you don't have to worry about a precision shot to knock a deer. You hit him and he's going to go down. 5.56 though, again, you have to have a well-placed shot. And these are, all these things I'm talking about, I don't want you to misunderstand me, okay? These are just my opinions and I'm sharing them. I could be right, I could be wrong. Who knows? These are just thoughts that are bouncing across in my waves up here in my head. Now let's move up another notch. Let's talk about large game, right? Elk, horses, whatever you got to shoot, cows to get some meat, right? Could this 5.56 do it? Could the 223 do it? I don't know, man. In a survival situation, I would probably shoot him a few times, but I mean, now I'm going to tear up the meat. 7.62 by 39. I'm confident that a well-placed shot with a 7.62 by 39, I'm very confident that that would knock down some large game. Of course, it would be pushing it to the extreme, but again, I think it would perform for me. Now, you know, again, we're talking about a 223 over here and a 7.62 over here. We're talking a 55 grain bullet. That's a lot to ask out of that small of a bullet to take down an elk. Over here we're talking about 123 grains, 150 grains, heavier bullets. I think there's more stopping power. 7.62 by 39. Survival situation, if I had to pick my AR or my AK, oh man, tough choice, but I think I'd grab the AK. I hate to say it. I'm an American too, grabbing a Russian gun, right? Anyway, let's stop the discussion and let's get into the reloading. That's what you're here for, right? You're here to see me reload some bullets. Let's talk about it. Okay, let's start as we always do. On my bench, I have a bunch of things that are necessary for reloading. First and most important, in my opinion, is some good, clear safety glasses. Now let's make sure that these are clear, free of obstructions, that they're not going to hinder my view on anything, and let's go ahead and put them on. So I'm going to go ahead and put them on right now, and then here shortly I'll talk about some of these items on the bench. Now right here, of course, you know, right here that I'm touching, this is my tumbler, and I have some brass in there. I'm going to be taking brass out of there, and I'm going to be loading them today. That's one thing that you're going to need. You're also going to need some powder. Today we're going to be using the IMR 4227. This is a very good ball powder. You're going to need some primers. We're going to be using Federal large rifle primers. You're going to need some bullets. 7.62, 123 grain bullets. Let's take a look at those. These are a soft tip bullet, jacketed soft tip, soft point, I'm sorry. They have a nice little cantilever on them. Those are the bullets we're going to be using today. We're going to need some load data. So I'm going to be using load data out of the Lyman 49th edition. Now let's turn over real quick to the page. 7.62 by 39 Russian. In this book you'll see some specs. You know, things like overall length, trim lengths, things like that. It'll tell you right here that you need large rifle primers. It'll tell you the diameter of the bullets if you're going to be casting them. They need to be sized, and gas checks and things like that. Now right here we're talking about the 123 grain jacketed soft point, IMR 4227, right? That's our powder, and it'll give you a started suggested load of 20 grains, and it'll give you a max load of 22 grains. This is the load you don't want to exceed. This is the approximate velocity of the 20 grain load. Now, let me talk about something else. You notice in this book that down here you see H335 in bold, and it says 30.5. This bold means that is the most accurate charge that they found for this round in their testing. Now you see it says go up not to exceed 34.5, and then it has a little plus sign next to it. That plus sign designates that that was a compressed load, meaning that when they seat the bullet would be seated, pushing the powder down as the bullet seats. But notice it's not in bold. This one is. So 30.5 grains of 335, that was the most accurate load. Again, here's a little key down here. Talks about what that plus sign means, that it's a compressed charge. So we're going to be getting data out of this book. Now, one thing that I like to do personally is I like to go through the book, and I like to write down what cartridge I'm going to be loading, what the overall length is of the completed cartridge, what my trim length of my brass is. Now it says 1.51 to 1.52 trim. You're probably wondering about that. This right here says 1.528 trim length. You see that? 1.528. But when you come down over here, it talks about trim length. It says 1.51. So you got 1.52 up here and 1.51 down here. And so I wrote down both trim lengths. And honestly, it doesn't really matter because you're talking a very small difference here between these two. So we'll just kind of play that by ear and see where we come up with when we get to that step. Now the bullets, Hornady, 123 grain, jacketed soft point. They're .310 diameter bullets. That's very important right there, and I'll talk about that here in a minute. Primers, Federal, large rifle primers. Powder, IMR, 4227, 20 to 22. Again, look right next to it. 20 to 22. Today I've circled 20 because that's where our charges are going to be, 20 grains. Now, at the bottom it says cases have been trimmed. I always write that down when I trim my cases, and we're going to go through that today. So again, I have all my information on a piece of paper. That way I can put the book away, get it away, and deal with just that paper. Now some of the other tools, this is a deburring tool, chamfering tool. I'll talk about that. This is a primer pocket cleaner. This is just a scoop that I can scoop powder with. Now it's important to use some sort of scoop instead of your fingers when you're dealing with powder, because you don't want to get the oils off of your hands into the powder and contaminate it. Here's a brush. We're going to just be running that through the case mouth. Here's a flash hole deburring tool, and here's a primer pocket reamer. Those are just some tools. You don't have to have all these tools, but these are some of the things I like to use. Obviously we're going to need a powder funnel. Right here in this little case, and I don't know how good I'll be able to open it one-handed, but there's a set of digital calipers, and we'll see those in a minute. I have a flathead screwdriver, a small crescent wrench, and a small pair of channel locks, a pen in case I need to write anything down on my paper, and a nice flashlight. Make sure the batteries are charged and that it's a good bright one. I like LEDs. Those work pretty well. Now, I forgot to mention, you need a reloading press. Today we're going to be using the RCBS Partner. This is a single stage reloading press. It's great. I've loaded tons of cartridges on it. It's one of the cheapest ones that you can buy. In fact, RCBS, it's their bottom of the line press. But man, I'll tell you, it works really well. I've used it for things all the way up to 4570 handgun loads. I mean, I've used it for a ton of things. Right here I have some 3-in-1 oil, and I'm just going to put a little oil on the ram here. You'll need some dyes. We're going to be using the RCBS 7.62 by 39 dyes. Now you'll notice it says 308.311-311. I'll talk about that in a minute. Inside there I also have a shell holder. Don't forget that, because you need a shell holder to go into this groove on the press. You need some lubricant for your brass. This is lubricant that's made by Hornady. There's some one-shot lubricant, Dillon Case Lube, that works good. And back behind is a can of Pledge. In a pinch, if you don't have any other lube available, you can use Pledge. I've used it before and it works great. Here's my Lyman Universal trimmer. I've already got it set for the appropriate case trim length. We're going to be using that. I have a digital scale, Frankford Arsenal, and I also have an RCBS 502 scale. I'm going to be using those. I'm also looking at this Hornady Lock and Load AP powder measure. I'm going to be using that as well. So those are some of the items that you'll need to reload this cartridge. Okay, right now all I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be pulling out, I have a small loading block here, I'm going to be pulling out 20 rounds of brass from this tumbler. Now, as I'm pulling the brass out, I want to kind of look at the brass and I want to inspect it. And you notice that there's little dings on the side of the brass. This 7.62 by 39 is a very violent action on some of these AK platforms, and it beats the hell out of your brass. So you want to look for brass that doesn't have significant wear and tear on it. Stuff that's, you know, I've seen some that have huge dents in the side of them, and I want to try to avoid that. Now, some of them that do have these large dents in the side, that's okay. I mean, we can deal with that. Those huge dents, when the case fires in the chamber, it'll fire form back to the original size. But you just want to make sure that there's no cracks or anything that's going to hurt the actual integrity of the case. So I'm just kind of digging through here. I know I'm doing this the slow way. I know that there's guys that have, you know, they pour this and they rotate the thing. I'd love to have one of those, but I just haven't gotten one yet. I'm a very patient person, you know. I don't get in a big hurry. And I think the outcome of my product makes it worth it. Now there's one that has a smaller dent. You see that dent from where it extracts it? You know, I've seen some that were really bad. So I got 10 rounds there. I'm going to go ahead and let you go for a minute, and I'll be back when I got my brass. Okay, as I was looking at them, I saw this one, and it had a pretty significant dent in the side of it. But you know, again, you could still use something like this. I'm not going to use it today, but if I was making just some plinking loads or something, as long as you're not losing the case integrity, okay, these dents are okay. Okay, the first step in the process is to take some of this Dillon case lube and take these brass cases, and I'm going to just give them a few squirts. And I'm not worried about the lube getting inside the case mouths or anything like that. Just a few squirts, and I'm just going to set them aside and let them dry. While they're drying, I'm going to be getting the case holder, or should I say the shell holder, from this set of dies. And I'm going to put the shell holder in the press. Now, I want to make sure that you understand that these shell holders do not come with most of your die sets. Now, if you're buying Lee dies, just make sure that you have a shell holder. Make sure that you have the type of shell holder that has the little groove here on the bottom, because there's other shell holders that are available, and those are the ones for the Lee Auto Prime tool. And you don't want to get them mixed up. You need these type that slide in. Now I've got my shell holder installed in my press. I'm just going to take a little bit of 3-in-1 oil and just put a couple drops just to get a nice smooth operation out of my press here. A lot of people overlook this step. Just need a little oil so that things can operate nice and freely. Takes just a second, and it goes a long way. There, you can hear that nice and smooth. You don't want excessive oil, but just enough. From here, I'm going to take my decapping die, and it's noted by the decapping pin. Now, I want to stress that on this RCBS set, it says 308, and then it says /311. Now, what they're referring to is the expander ball. Let me take this die apart and I'll show you what I'm talking about. The expander ball. This die set comes with 2 different expander balls. Okay, one of them is for 308 diameter bullets, which I have in my hand here. I'm going to put that away, and the other one, which is already installed, is for .311 diameter bullets. So this die set will use both sets of bullets. And again, since we're using the .310s, we need the applicable expander ball. So now let's go ahead and put our die back together. I'm going to put the decapping pin in until it sticks out about 3/16 of an inch or so. You don't want it sticking out too hard. Then from there, you just lock this small lock ring. take a crescent wrench, lock this lock ring down. Now this die, the decapping die, is ready to be installed into the press because I have this depth correct. I'm going to raise the ram on the press all the way up, and I'm going to thread the die down until the die body touches the shell holder. You can barely see the shell holder peeking through right there. So I'm just going to thread this down until you see it touch. Okay, you see the die body touching? Now I'm going to lower the shell holder just a little bit, and I'm going to give the die body just a little bit of a bite. So I have a good connection there. From here, the die body's not going to move because I have the ram against it. I'm going to just go ahead and lock the die lock ring. Tighten it down. Doesn't have to be crazy tight, just a little bit. And now we're ready for the decapping operation. The die is set. Okay, before I start the actual decapping, I need to put this cup onto the press. So let me take this camera off the tripod for a second. Hope I don't get too shaky on you. But I'm going to come around and I'm going to look, and when the ram is raised, the primers will fly out of that little hole right there. Okay, so when the primers come out of that hole, they need to go into this cup. So I'm just going to put this cup right here. It connects right there on the side of the press. So as the ram comes up, the primers will spit out right into that cup. Okay, let's come back. And from here I have my little loading block. I'm going to insert the case into the press, raise the ram all the way up. It'll knock out the old primer, and it'll resize the outer dimensions of the case. Now as I lower the ram, you'll feel like this little catch. What that catch is that's the expander ball, and what it's doing is it's sizing the inside diameter of this case mouth to the proper dimension that's going to fit the 0.310 diameter bullets. See, and it knocked out the old primer. So we've done, on that first stroke, we've done 3 things. Again, we've decapped, meaning we've knocked out the old primer. We've resized the outer dimension of the case, and the last thing that we did was we resized the inner dimension of the case mouth. So I'm going to just complete the process on all of these rounds. There's a part of the primer. So again, I'm just decapping, resizing. And I'm setting them back on the loading block when I'm done at the other end of it. Now one thing I want to show you is another piece of brass over here. You see how this piece of brass up around the top, it's got like a beveled area? What's happened here is this brass has been loaded before with a 308 diameter bullet, and then it's been fired. And so now watch what would happen if I was to decap this one. It'll take some of that out. Not all of it, but you see some of that rippling stuff kind of took the majority of it out. So that's, if you come across any brass that looks like that, that's probably what's happened. It's probably been used for a 308 diameter bullet. Now there's some cast loads that I have that I load the 7.62. In fact, I use the Lee 160 grain round nose bullet on these. It's the same bullet that I shoot out of my 30-30, and I've had pretty good luck with it. Of course, you got to find a good recipe for that, and maybe in the future I'll do a video on that. So I'm just going through the decapping step. Give you another view here. The reloading process is a very fun process. Oops. My shop is a mess. I had a bunch of sawdust on the floor. When it fell, I had sawdust going everywhere. You know, as I'm doing this decapping, it brings attention to something that I forgot to mention, and that is the 7.62 by 39. This round is very popular in the aspect that it uses a lot of steel casings. Now, steel casings, you know, they probably do that because they're designing it for the battlefield, right? Well, that's good, but in a reloader's sense, if you've got steel casings, it's going to be hard to reload those things. So one thing I want to show you, and I'm writing it down right now as we speak, I'm drawing a little picture. One thing I want to talk to you about is when you look down into the case mouth of a 7.62, I want to make sure that you understand the difference between a Berdan prime and a boxer prime. Now if you look down in there, I don't know if we're going to be able to see it, if I can get the light right or not. A lot of shadows in there. You can barely see it. If I look straight down in there, sometimes you'll notice that there's a well, it's hard to see. The point that I'm trying to make is when you look down inside the case, if you're looking straight down in the case and you see two little holes like that, that's the Berdan prime. And what will happen is if you put those on your reloading press and you try to decap them, you'll break the decapping rod. So make sure that the brass that you have has a single hole in the center, and that'll be a boxer primed brass, and therefore you won't have trouble trying to decap those. You won't be worried about breaking a decapping pin. Gosh, I wish I could show you that. It's just so hard to see down into the case mouth there. Okay, I got some better batteries on my flashlight. You can see down in there, see the one hole in the middle? If that's the correct kind of brass. If you have two holes, it's not going to work. It'll break that decap. Okay, at this point I'm going to take my little Lee, because you see the primer pocket's kind of dirty. I'm just going to take my Lee primer pocket cleaner, and I'm just going to clean the primer pocket a little bit. All this does is it gets rid of the carbon and the dirt and stuff that might have been in the primer pockets. Nothing too significant. It just makes it where they're a little bit better as far as being able to seat the primers uniform. Nothing too crazy. If you wanted to use a tool such as this primer pocket uniforming tool, you could also use this too. The only problem with this tool is it'll take a little bit of brass out, and in time it'll kind of loosen your primer pocket. So I try not to use that too much. I try to use just a simple tool just to get rid of the gunk out of there. If you don't have one of these Lee tools, you can use a small flathead screwdriver. I used to use that a long time ago and it works really good. No problems at all. So all we're doing is just kind of cleaning our brass, prepping our brass, getting it ready to go. Doesn't have to be, you know, you could really skip this step if you wanted to, and you wouldn't have much to worry about. We're just cleaning them up, getting rid of the carbon. Another thing I want to mention is if you're trying to get uniform brass, or as far as uniform accuracy, it's important that you have uniform brass. And what I mean by that is all these brass that I'm loading today are all Winchesters. So you can separate your brass by type, and then therefore you'll have a better chance at producing a more accurate load. Okay, this next step, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this deburring cutter into the case, and what it's going to do is it's going to clean the inside of the flash hole. Now what happens is when they manufacture this brass, they run a punch through the bottom to punch out the flash holes, and inside the case there's brass that's just kind of like real crazy inside, and all this cutter does is it goes in and it removes all of those inconsistencies. So it's a great tool to have. It's not 100% necessary, but it works good. Now you're probably wondering, is this brass even, or should I say, is this bullet even going to be accurate enough to shoot to those levels, you know, where you have to go in there and worry about doing this step? Yeah, I think it would help at least get your bullets where they're a little bit more uniform. So I'm just going through. You could totally skip this step if you wanted to. It's not a necessary step. It's just an added level of it's just an added measure that we're going to use to uniform the cases. And when you have uniform case length, you have uniform crimp, you have uniform powder charge, when you start getting everything the same, that's when you start getting results that are the same. You have uniform brass, you have uniform case lengths, you know, you've done your flash holes, you've done all these steps to your brass. That right there is what will give you the most potential for it. I'm not going to say it's going to make you crazy accurate, but it's definitely going to make it where you'll have consistency. So if you're hitting right on the money, you'll consistently hit right on the money. If you're not, you won't. So I'm going to go ahead and finish doing all these flash holes, and then I'll be back. Okay, I'm finishing up my last flash hole deburring. Now you can see on my cutter that there's a lot of brass that I removed from the cases, and there's a lot of brass inside of the cases themselves. I'm not worried about getting that brass out yet because I'm going to set up for my trimming step now. So I'll clean those case mouths after I trim them. Okay everybody, what we have here is I've got my brass in this holder, and I'm going to set it just behind the trimmer. This is the Lyman Universal Trimmer. I really like this trimmer because it'll accept a lot of different sizes of brass. So basically what I have over here is I have a little collet, and I'm going to stick the case in and just kind of rotate it a little bit. There's a pilot, and there's different pilots that are corresponding to the different sizes of cases that you might want to trim. Now I've already got this trimmer set up, so I'm going to lock this case into place by rotating this away from me. And now I'm going to spin this arbor, this cutter, and I'm going to push the cutter in towards the brass until this part of the cutter here touches the body of the trimmer. This will trim the brass. You see there's trimming a little bit. Now when it bottoms out against the case body of the trimmer, again it's trimmed, it can't go no further in, so then therefore it would be trimmed to the appropriate length. Now again, looking at our paper, we want between 1.51 and 1.52. That's going to be our desired trim length. So let's go ahead and measure and see where we're at. Now this trimmer should already be set up for a good measurement, 1.525, and that's good because the book said 1.528, so that's good. We're set. From here I'm just going to take the trimmed cases and I'm going to set them to the opposite end. You can tell the cases that have been trimmed versus the ones that have not been trimmed because they're much shinier around the case mouth. Another thing that you could do is you could deburr the outside of the case, because when you trim you'll develop these small little burrs and they need to be removed. They're sharp. So you just take your little deburring tool as you go. I don't do anything inside the case mouth. You can take a small amount of material out. It's important not to remove a bunch of material. So there you have it. This is the trimming step. Again, you put the case in, you rotate the cutter until you feel it bottom out, pull the case out, you'll feel the little burrs, and then just deburr the case. When you're done, set it in the loading block at the opposite end so that you know which ones you've done and which ones need to be done. This is a great trimmer. I really like it. Works good. It's, gosh, I think I paid about 85 bucks for it or something like that when I bought it. Now there's one thing I want to stress, and I may have not stressed it enough, and if I'm getting redundant here I apologize for that, but I don't want you to think that you have to remove a lot of material when you deburr. You don't need to remove a lot of material. All you're supposed to be doing right now is taking the sharp edges off. Okay? That one hardly needed any trim. Looks like a bullet or something fell in the background. Let's take a closer look. Let's see if we can hit a little bit of a different angle here. See the cutter a little better. Yeah, I hope I'm not boring you to death with this. I'll do one more and then I'll finish the other 10 on my own. I'm just hoping that you guys get to see everything in the process here. See, it's nice and shiny around the case mouth. Definitely tell that it's been trimmed. So I'm going to go ahead and finish the rest of these, and I'll be back in a minute. Okay, there's the trimmer. It's got brass everywhere, and there is the brass. They're trimmed, resized, deprimed, all that. The next step is going to be to prime those cases, but before we do that, we're going to run a brush through the case mouths. The reason I like to run the brush through the case mouths before I prime is because I don't want this metal tip coming in contact with one of the primers in the cases. So I'm just going to make a quick step here, taking all the gunk out of the cases. If you wanted to blow some air in the cases, you could if you have an air compressor. That's no problem at all doing that. Just make sure that you're not accidentally putting moist air into the cases, because once you prime them and powder them, if there's any moisture inside, it could really mess up your load. So just be careful if you're going to be using air, that your air compressor is dry air. I've seen some people, their air compressors, they're shooting oil and all kinds of stuff out of their air compressor, so you don't want to be dealing with that when it's coming to reloading. Seems like I'm probably doing a lot of this stuff real fast, and that is because I've had a lot of comments that people, you know, they loved the reloading videos, but they said that they were a bit on the long side, so I'm kind of trying to shorten that up a little bit. So there we have the cases. They've all been decapped, resized, trimmed, deburred, and now we've ran the brush through the case mouth, so now they're ready to prime. Okay, I've got my primers here. These are the Federal large rifle primers again. I'm going to set this priming rod up around, I'm going to rotate it, I'm going to raise the ram a little bit, I'm going to get it up inside the shell holder there. I don't need this anymore, this cup with those spent primers. I'm just going to make sure that each primer that I use has a anvil, and that's the little Hot Wheels looking thing that you can see there in the center that's holding the primer compound. Now if you don't have an anvil, what could happen to your case is when the firing pin hits the primer, it does not make the primer go off because the priming compound doesn't come into contact with an anvil, and so you have to have that. Now when you seat the primer, you want to make sure that they're flush or just a little bit below flush. So I'm just kind of raising the ram, lowering them down, running my finger across, filling them, and seeing how they fill. I'm just going to prime these 20 cases. You could also use the Lee Auto Prime tool. It's a hand tool. I have one. It works great. It's a good option for priming. It works really good. So that's definitely another option that you can think about. When it comes to priming, you don't want to force anything or make anything hard or nothing like that. You want to just let things happen as they will. And the cases will prime very easily if you've done all your case prep up to this point. Again, I can't stress it enough. Make sure that every primer has an anvil. I've seen people reloading on YouTube and they've been putting primers in that didn't have anvils, and then I'm sure they had misfires because it's darn near impossible for a primer to ignite without an anvil. I like priming on the press because it seems to have, you know, you get a lot of feel to the primer, plus you have a lot of leverage, mechanical leverage on your side. Makes the priming process a lot easier, especially if you're starting to lose dexterity in your hands and things like that. Priming on the press definitely makes it nice. So if you're an elder gentleman, you know, or lady for that matter, out there reloading, and you don't have much dexterity, you might consider priming on the press. I do both ways. Sometimes I use the priming tool, and sometimes I prime here on the press. But I will be honest, I've learned over time that I'm starting to get fond of the press as far as priming. Kind of like it. It's kind of nice. So I'll see you in a minute. Once you get these cases primed, nothing else needs to go inside the case mouth. No air, no brush, nothing. Because once these are primed, like I said, they're starting to be hot, so you don't want to mess with them. Okay, I have my 502 scale set at 0. And I'm looking over here at the lines, and you can see that my scale is very close to being zeroed. So I'm just going to make a small adjustment over here on this screw, and you can see that I've zeroed up. Now I can take my bowl to my powder dispenser, and I can throw a charge. Now my powder dispenser, my powder measure over here, you can it's off camera, but I've got it set to throw approximately 20 grains. So when I put this on, you can obviously see that it's way too heavy, and that's because it's set for 0. I have to go set it up for 20 grains now. You can see next to the 0 there is a series of small lines. Each one of these small lines represents 5. So when you get to this first large line, that would be 25. So I need to go up to 20, which would mean I would need to go up to the 4th line just before that large line. On the other end of the scale, see, that would be 20 there. On the other end of the scale, I need to make sure that my little counterweight is at 0. If I wanted a charge, say for example I wanted 20.4 or something like that, then I would move that little weight up to the 4. But since I want 20 on the button, I'm set up for 0 there, and I'm set up for 20 here. Now I would look at my charge and see where it comes in relation to being zeroed. You can tell that my charge is just a tad bit below 0, which would tell me that my charge is throwing like 19 point something. Okay, so my charge is a little bit light. So what I would do is I would take my trickler and I would trickle a little bit of powder up. A couple granules at a time until I trickle up to 20 on the button. So now we're coming back over here looking. Now we're right on the money. So we're throwing 20 grains. Again, my powder dispenser is throwing a little bit under, but we still have 20 grains. Now what I want to do is I want to verify that charge. So I'm going to use this little digital scale. I'm going to set it right there, and I'm going to turn it on, and when I turn it on, it's going to zero to that bowl. From here I'm going to take this charge, I'm just going to dump it into this scale, 20.1. So that tells me that both of my scales are accurate in reading the charges that I'm going to be throwing. It also tells me that my powder measure over there is very close at throwing the correct charge. So from here I'm going to take one case, Set it to the other side, put my funnel down, and I'm just going to pour this charged case into that piece of brass. From here, I'm going to go throw some more chargers into my bowl. From my powder measure. And again, I'm looking to see if I come up to 0. Now this is matically dampened, so if it's kind of jammed, you can kind of move it a little bit, get it going, take a look, and it looks like we're right on the money. So from here, I'm going to go ahead and charge another case. I trust the balance scale now, and I trust my powder measure, and I trust everything because I verified everything against everything. I'm going to go ahead and charge all these cases now. I'll do one more, just for good measure. And again, it's right on the money. We don't need this small digital scale no more. We're going to use the balance scale. Take my charge, take another piece of brass, and you notice I move them from one end of the loading block to the other end of the loading block. And that tends to help me so that I don't forget what's charged and what's not charged. Let's weigh it. Now you really technically don't have to weigh every single charge. I just, I'm really funny about, wanting to get consistency, so I kind of like to do things that way. I like to make sure everything's right on the money. And the result is I have pretty good ammunition. Now let me show you another method that you can use to charge these cases. Okay, right now I have a case in my hand. It's not charged or anything. I'm going to set it on my scale, and I'm going to turn the scale on. What will happen is the scale will zero itself to that case. You notice it says 0? Now I'm going to take this case up to my powder measure. I'm going to put a load into this case. This case is now charged with powder. And take that charged case back down to the scale, set it down, and let's see what kind of charge we have. 19.9. So you can do that to charge your cases as well. Now be careful if you do that, because if you can see that there's a negative on there, that's because it's missing the case. If you put another case on there, you might have a difference because these cases might be different in weight. So you can zero your scale again, right there. See that? My scale's zeroed. Again, we're going to charge again. 1, 2. Put it on there. 20.1. Set that on there. See, there's the difference because the brass is a little bit heavier. That brass is heavier than the last piece, so we're just hitting the tare button. It zeroes us up. Charge the case. That way you don't have to sit there and turn the scale on and off every time. Okay. When you're using your powder measure, try to be consistent about the stroke that you give that powder measure. If you're going to bump it on the upstroke, bump it every time. If you're not going to bump it, don't bump it. You want to be consistent. So see, the cases, you can tell that they vary in weight. As long as we're between 20 and 22, we're good. But we're shooting for 20. And you can tell that I'm moving them all the way to the other side of the loading block. That's because I don't want them getting confused. 20.1. Take another one. 19.9, so we're good there. You know, some people would say, oh, you don't need to weigh every one, and they're right, you really don't. You know, sometimes when I reload I weigh every 5th one or every 10th one. It just kind of depends on what kind of mood I'm in. And you know, I figured since I'm shooting a video today, I might as well just go full out and let you see everything. Let's hit that tare weight again. You want to be sure of one thing also. Watch the scale here. Watch when I blow on it. Let's hit it to 0 right there. Now watch when I blow air on it. You see some of the readings could go crazy. So you want to make sure that you don't have any fans in the area or anything like that, because that could really jack up your what you think you're throwing. You know, you got a fan going or something in the room and you think everything's cool, and then you wonder why you're blowing your gun up or whatever. You know, just make sure that you're checking everything and that you're being consistent with everything. You know, and earlier I was talking about, you know, flash hole deburring and making sure that the primer pockets are all good and making sure that the trim lengths are all the same. That one's a little short. Let's throw that one back. Let's try that one again. $19.9. So the purpose of making sure that everything is uniform is because we want to get as much uniformity out of our accuracy as possible. And that's why I stress to make sure that the case, you know, trim lengths are the same and that the powder charge is the same and the flash holes have all been deburred. That just helps with making sure everything's good. Now, what I like to do at this point is I like to go down into the mouths of the cases and I like to look at the cases themselves, at the powder, and I'm trying to compare the powder charges against each other. So let me grab my flashlight over here. I'm just looking down and I'm starting, and I'm just starting with the top row and I'm going down and I'm just making sure that my powder levels are uniform. If you see one that's real high or one that's real low, you know, you might want to stop, take a look, and see what the problem is. Weigh that charge. Make sure everything's cool, because if it's not, you could be setting a bullet on top of something that ain't uniform. You could have a case that's low, a low charge. You could have a case that's hot. So you just want to make sure that you don't run into those problems. Okay, now I have all my bullets here, and it's time to put in the bullet seating die. So I've got my bullets here, I've got my charge cases here, got Spider-Man hanging out, and I'm going to put in my bullet seating die, but I got to remove my decapping and resizing die. I also can flip down my primer arm, don't need that no more. So again, I'm going to take this die out. And I'm going to insert my bullet seating die. Now, this seating die, I have the seating stem backed all the way out, and I also have the die lock ring backed all the way out. I'm just going to start to thread it in. I'm going to take a lubed, a charged case, putting the charged case into the shell holder. I'm going to raise the ram all the way up. Now, what I want to do at this point is I want to lower down the die body until I feel the die body touch the top of the case. From here, I feel it touch, right? So from here, once it touches the case, I'm just going to back it back about a half of a turn, and I'm going to lock the die lock ring. The purpose of backing it out half a turn is to remove the crimp feature from the die temporarily, because all I'm concerned about right now is adjusting my die to set the bullet seating depth. Okay, I hope I'm not confusing you here. I've backed the die out. Now I'm going to lower my die down, my ram down, and I'm going to put a bullet into the case. I'm going to slowly raise the ram up. Nothing's going to happen because my bullet seating stem is backed all the way out. But from here, I'm going to take my little screwdriver and I'm going to tighten the bullet seating stem downward until I feel it touch the bullet. Once I feel it touch the bullet, I'm going to lower the ram a little bit, and I'm going to increase the bullet seating stem downward clockwise. Then I'll raise the ram again. What's going to happen here is I'm going to start to seat the bullet a little bit. See that? So we're just barely starting to seat the bullet. Now I want to look at the distance between the top of the case mouth here and the cantilever. And that distance is going to tell me what kind of adjustment that I need to make on my bullet seating stem, which I need to adjust that bullet seating stem. So I'm going to back my camera out here a little bit, and I'm going to adjust my bullet seating stem. I'm just going to go clockwise a little bit, about a turn or two. 1, 2, and then now I'm going to raise the ram. That seats the bullet a little bit more. Let's take a look. See how we're getting closer? We're getting closer to the desired bullet seating depth. Now, we're still not quite there, so I got to make another adjustment. I'll go in about a turn, I'll raise the ram, and it'll seat the bullet a little bit deeper. Now if we look at the bullet again, you can see that, whoops, excuse me, you can see that we're getting much closer to the desired length. At this point, it's important to get out our calipers and start measuring. Okay, so let me get this different angle here. So I've got the bullet seating stem all the way out. I'm going to get the bullet out of here. Actually, it looks like it's just a little bit long still. So let me make one small adjustment, about a half of a turn, raise the ram, lower the ram. Let's see where we're at. Now we're starting to get onto the cantilever a little bit. So I need to check from my overall length, which is 2.20. Now we're going to measure. We're going to get my calipers, open them up. Whoops, sorry about that camera work there. And we're looking for 2.20. 2.22. So we're still just a hair long. I'm going to insert the case back into the press. Again, I'm coming up to my bullet seating stem, and I'm going to go about a half of a turn. Now, this is crucial when you're doing the first bullet. The closer you get to the desired seating length, or should I say the desired overall length, the smaller the increments need to be on this bullet seating stem. Now, I seated the bullet a little bit deeper. Let's take another measurement. Again, we're looking for 2.20. 2.217, so we're just a little bit long. Put the bullet back in. Again, a small adjustment on the bullet seating stem. I went about 1/8 of a turn. Seat the bullet. We're getting closer. We're looking for 2.20. 0.207. So we got just about a 1/16 of a turn. One, I've already adjusted the bullet seating stem, raised the ram up, lower. Looks like we're right in the cantilever, real nice. Let's take a look at our measurement. 2.2025. Okay, we're very, very close. Put it in. I'm gonna go, oh gosh, about a 30/2 of a turn. When it comes to adjusting your bullet seating stem, again, you don't want to make too large of adjustments, because if you do, it's kind of like cutting a board too short. Yeah, 219.8. We're just under. So we're looking good on our bullet seating stem. You know, if you cut a board too short, it's just too short, so you don't want to do that. Okay, now we have established the bullet seating depth on this round. Okay, now what we need to do is we need to come around this cantilever, and we need to put a nice little roll crimp of the brass into the cantilever. What I mean by that is we want the brass to kind of bend in like that at the top into the cantilever. You know, there's two types of crimps that you can use. There's a taper crimp, which takes the brass like that, and then there's a roll crimp. This die has a setting for a roll crimp. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my die lock ring, I'm going to loosen it, and I'm going to loosen the die body out. I'm also going to take the bullet seating stem all the way out. And you're probably sitting there wondering, why are you taking the bullet seating stem out? You just did all that work to find your bullet seating depth. There's a reason, because to establish a crimp, what I need to do is I need to lower the die body down to establish that crimp. And if I do that with the bullet seating stem where it currently was, when I lower the die body, it would seat the bullet deeper. And I don't want to do that because I've already established the bullet seating depth that I wanted. So from here, I'm going to raise the ram again, and I'm going to lower the die body down until I feel it touch the case mouth again. Okay, so you feel it touch the case mouth. Once it touches the case mouth, I lower the ram a little bit, and I go in about 1/8 of a turn increments, and I raise the ram. What this will do is this will start to crimp the cartridge. I inspect the cartridge for crimp. If it doesn't have enough, I rotate the die body another 1/8 of a turn. Then I crimp again. I inspect the cartridge again until I find the crimp that I like. You don't want to go too heavy on your crimp, because if you do, what could happen is you could crunch the whole case. So you don't want to do that. So there, you can see that bullet has a nice little roll into it. And that's exactly what I want. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that bullet in there, because I have the crimp that I want, and I have the bullet seating depth that I want. So from here, it's important to set this die. So I'm going to come up here, I'm going to raise the ram up, and I'm going to tighten. That'll lock the die from moving, so that I can tighten the die lock ring. Now when I tighten the die lock ring into place, I'm securing that crimp section of the die, so that die is set to crimp. Now I need to come back to my bullet seating depth, so I'm going to lower my bullet seating stem down until I feel it touch the bullet. Once it touches the bullet, you see, you can feel it right there. Once it touches the bullet, I lock the bullet seating stem lock nut. This will give me the correct bullet seating depth, and it'll also give me the correct crimp. So now let's take a charged case. Now I'm going to scroll down because I don't need to look at the die no more. The die is set. Let's take a charged case, put it in the press. We're going to put a bullet in there. We're going to raise the ram. From here, let's take a look. We have the right crimp. We have the right depth. Let's double check our depth though. 2.20 is what we're looking for, and we're 2.193. So we're good. From here, I'm going to go through all of these rounds, making sure that they're charged cases. I put them in the press and I raise the ram. And what happens is two things. I'm seating the bullet and I'm crimping the bullet all in one step. So I'm going to go ahead and finish these guys up. We're almost done. So now that die is working, it's doing 2 steps on each stroke. Crimp and bullet seating. And those bullets look great. So I'm going to finish these up and I'll be right back. If you want to add a little bit more concentricity to your bullets, here's a simple tip that you could use. As you're seating the bullet, you'll come up with the stroke halfway, seat a little bit, and then turn the bullet 180 degrees and then seat it the rest of the way. And this sometimes helps with concentricity. I don't do that very often though. Well, last step in this process that I like to do is I like to take just a rag and I like to clean off the bullets and make sure, and again, I'm inspecting them, I'm checking for any kind of problems or anything that's wrong, any kind of discrepancies, cases failing, making sure my primers are seated, bullet seating depth, crimp, all that stuff. And I'm moving them to the other end once and again. Now, I want to say thanks everybody for watching my video today on 7.62 by 39. I hope I didn't offend anybody with my earlier comments at the start of this video. Hope that the video wasn't too long. I know sometimes I get carried away because I want to share so many details. But, I hope you hung in there with me and got through this together with me. But as always, I want to say thank you again from the bottom of my heart for watching the videos. Feel free to comment as always, like, subscribe, thumbs up, share, send me a PM, send me an email, and as always, have a beautiful day everybody. We'll talk to you next time, and take care. Bye bye. One more quick thing before I go. This piece of paper that has all my data on this round, this goes with the bullets. This round came out in 1943 and it worked all the way up into the 1970s. It was a very popular round, and at the end of the 1970s it got replaced with the 5.54 by 39. So if you haven't seen that, take a look. That's an excellent bullet. Anyway, again everybody, thanks for watching. Have a beautiful day. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye. I'm going to clean these up. Getting hungry too. Think I'm gonna go eat. Later.